I love endings. I don't know about y'all. There's something very weird about them for me. I think part of it is at the end of a movie is when I'm most hooked, and they're trying to get me to watch the sequel. I know, and I recognize that. But I really like knowing what happened, and I think that's just something I've always had. I was always the kid who, when I read a book, halfway through I'll be like, this better end well, and I jump to the end, and then I'll read that, and then come to the middle to make sure that my emotional investment was worthwhile, right? And I do that with TV shows too. House of the Dragon, just started. After the first episode, I went to Wikipedia, read the plot from the book. I'm not gonna say it, but I needed to know first. And then I was like, okay, I can invest myself into this. And this happens with movies too. And I'm gonna reference a lot of superhero movies, so I hope y'all are ready for that. But even in the first Avengers movie, like New York blew up as it does in every disaster movie. London blows up too. I'm sure you've seen the London Eye just like get into thousands of pieces multiple times now. But when they finally, like, New York's blown up, and I'm like, okay, what happens now? Like, someone's probably frantically cleaning up all of the pieces of New York. They're just chilling eating shawarma. And I'm like, that's great for the guy whose store survived, but like, what are we doing? Like, what happens after this? And then the movie ends. And thankfully, they did sort of pick that up. I think part of that also, I'm on the internets a lot. I don't know if y'all are on Twitter, but every couple months this tweet goes viral of, I feel if the Avengers were real, we would hate them. And part of that is just like, you don't want your car thrown by the Hulk like Thanos and then like nothing happens, right? And you're just like, there's your car, you just finished paying it off. And that also was something that I thought about at the end of that Avengers movie. And this concept was thought about also at the other movies. Another movie, sorry, this is my last one, that talks a lot about like what happens if we hate superheroes was The Incredibles movie. If you haven't watched it, it's my favorite animated movie. They're all great. There's a second one now. And it definitely kind of thought about that, of like what happens after the classic superhero movie ends, right? The people, some are happy, but some probably aren't. And this theme kind of translates for me into incidents, right? Like, I really get excited when I'm at the end of an incident. Part of that is, relief that I'm done. But part of that is I really wanted to know what happened, right? Like, now I finally know, and we've been through that life cycle. Now I'm like, okay, cool. But it doesn't end there, does it? Like, here's an incident life cycle, and we have the beginning parts, right? Like, something triggers the incident, you were paged, I'm gonna fluff through that, like you resolved it, right? Like, I know that's the hard part, but then you know what happened. But in a lot of ways, like things are just beginning from there because you wanna know why it happened. There's a lot of work that you have to still do after you know what happened, and that's kind of exciting to me, though I know that's not the case for everyone. We usually do a retrospective, we usually do some sort of retrospective document is written, and we also have some meetings about that, right? A lot of things happen after incidents are over. And we know why, and we chatted a lot about this yesterday during the customer empathy, incidents are customer empathy workshop that you didn't sign up for talk. We know that they're good for continuous learning, and we want to become better at doing them, so we're better for our customers and everything, but a lot of people don't like instant retrospectives or all of the process that goes with it. We do have some best practices, and I'll kind of chat through about them. And if y'all are already in SRE, as I know about half of you are, you probably know these. And some of them is they have to be blameless, right? Like, we don't go into incidents intending for things to go badly. I mean, if you are, then you should be fired. But like, if it's non-malicious, right? We want to make sure that we're kind to each other as we do the retrospective, because we didn't intend for the bad thing to happen. And the system shouldn't have let you do that thing if you were one of the triggers of the incident going badly, right? We also have to have ownership because there's a lot of different things that happen during the incident, and then after it's over, there's a lot of things to continue to do. So usually you have something like a follow-up owner who is in charge of making sure that we complete all the tasks, sort of the incident commander after the incident is over in a lot of ways, though it's not just one person, right? You're all working together to make sure that you get the maximum return on investment that incident kind of threw at you. All of a sudden, you have a lot of investment into your technology you have to do. And we're collaborating with a lot of different people, right? We're all different, we have different skill sets, and we come together. And the best portion of having a good incident retrospective is kind of using everyone's strengths and trying to figure out what happened and coming at it from different perspectives and kind of growing together from there. We don't want to make sure we're duplicating any work, especially if that incident impacted multiple teams, but kind of going together kind of in one direction. A big aspect of that that's similar but slightly on the side is it's a little time sensitive too. A lot of people have very quick turnarounds that they want instant retrospectives to be done, like the post-mortem doc and the meetings. Some people say it has to be done within 72 hours. Some people say 5 days. Really depends on your organization. But you really want to get that information in quick. And it makes sense. If you had a dashboard that told you that something was wrong, you might not have the historical part of that dashboard, so you got to screenshot it quickly, and all the other information that you have to collect to make sure that you know everything that you need to know to kind of understand the incident later. But how do y'all feel about instant reviews and retrospectives? Who likes them? Can I get a little? Okay, that's about half, more than I expected actually. And who doesn't like them? Okay, we got a couple brave folks. I know you feel it on the inside. And I know why, right? Like, you've already been through this stressful situation. Now you have to like relive it. In the worst case scenario, if the incident really, really like took time and was stressful, the last thing that you want to do within 72 hours is go record that information constantly and then kind of study it as deeply as you can. We know they're important, but that doesn't mean we have to like it, right? And to kind of tell you a little bit, I'll also tell you about my first incident. I know some of those feelings also come from historical, going through incidents that didn't go well, and then the retrospective also didn't go well. So when I was a baby SRE, I worked on a team that worked on virtual machines. We provided virtual machines to other people inside my company to do things with it. And here's an example of virtual machine architecture if you've not looked at it before. So essentially, we had machines on bare metal and on cloud that obviously had an operating system. And then we installed virtual machines on top of that that also had their own operating system. And there was an exploit that had been announced quietly through like small channels, like, hey, there's a vulnerability in the software, like patch it up quickly, right? So our team was like, oh crap, we have to patch up not only every machine's operating system, but all of the operating systems on top of that, right? And that's when things kind of got tricky. So my job was tell everyone that they have to reinstall their machines. But we didn't want to tell them why, because it hadn't been announced yet. But we were just like, hey, like, that operating system sucks. Don't worry about it. Just like reinstall. But as you know, when you do a reinstall, you're basically wiping the machine. There were many other projects that we were working on at the time. So we were like, hey, we're also trying to coordinate better to kind of know who the owner of that machine is and all of this other information that we really did want to know. So I was frantically sending out emails to a lot of people. Did y'all know that people don't read their emails? Because that's how I learned about it. So they were just piling up probably in someone's inbox, and no one was sort of listening to me. So I sent emails being like, hey, reinstall in 30 days, or in 90 days, or we'll delete. 60 days, or we'll delete. 30 days, or we'll delete. And then we started switching off people's instances because we were like, that's how they'll notice that we're going to delete it, so they should know that something will happen. And that helped a lot. When we switched them off, they were like, oh, okay, cool. I didn't get the email, but now I know. And they would just make a new instance and kind of transfer it over. The tricky part was we weren't just providing virtual machines to individuals, we were also providing them to teams as servers. And that's when things were hard, because their transition, if you've ever transferred a server from one place to another, we know it's hard. So that's why we gave them the timeline. So they'll be like, we can't do it in 30 days because we just now read your email, give us another 30. And I was like, cool. So basically, 60 days later, I'm just like, I gave them the time. I'm going in. I'm just going to delete all of these, right? So I was just there, just deleting. I basically deleted an entire cluster. I was told to be clear. I didn't just like go ahead and do what I want. But then all of a sudden, an incident was called. And they were like, hey, like our server's down. I'm like, yeah, I deleted it. And they're like, why would you do that? So it ended up that I deleted a server for an internal service that handled one of our functions. I can't remember which one, probably shouldn't say. And they did not have a backup. And it was a server. And it's really hard to sort of spin one up if you've never done it before. All the SREs in the room know production SRE got it going on. They know what to do because it's facing people. But the stuff that keeps your internal stuff running, that thing never switches off, right? They don't know how to switch it back on. So I was just there like, I don't know how to help you here. But we were able to go back and kind of give them all the information we can, but it was mostly just like the status of the machine so that they could recreate it. But then we did the post-mortem, right? We knew what happened. I deleted their machine, but I was told to, right? There wasn't any relevant data to save because it was gone. And the investigation was mostly like, how do we recreate this? And there was a lot of things to do for them and for us too, but that's when things sort of got hairy, right? What is the remediation work here? Like, we have to recreate their server, but as a service provider, is it my responsibility to do that or their responsibility to do that? So when the postmortem came, they were like, this is your fault. And I was like, no, y'all, I read the book. It said I was supposed to be blameless. Why did y'all write Ajuna deleted my server in your postmortem? And thankfully, like, I was like, guys, is that okay? Like, talking to my older SRE friends, and they were like, no, it's not. So we went in and I was like, okay, the team did this thing. But definitely, I was already like, ooh, this feels kind of weird. And then it was like, who's the owner of this, right? Like, am I supposed to recreate their machine? I don't know how it works. I can tell them, I can give them a machine with the same specs, but I can't run it up for them, right? That's not the service our team provided. But the corporation part of it was really great. Like, it was a time for me to talk to my other older SRE friends and be like, this is what happened. They're like, well, you did the best that you could, but this is a kind of lose-lose situation. And from there, I think I kind of got a little bit of like a weird feeling about retrospectives, because I was like, there's not really a lot to do there. And that kind of happens a lot, right? Like, how do the things we know are true, because we have the best practices doc and we read them, how do those kind of translate into every situation? Because emotions are high, because things happened, and I probably did ruin a couple people's day that day. And I feel for them, but it was also like, we did the best that they could. The other issue that we discovered was the person who created their server and had their contact information on it left that team, and maybe even the company. So basically, they didn't know I was contacting them that entire time, right? So that was a key aspect for us to think about, but it was also like, I don't know how we could have done that better. When I switched off their servers, they just switched them back on, thinking there was a blip in the system. So all in all, it was a bad situation all around. But how do we learn, right? There's all these different parts of the incident. There's the technology, there is the processes, right? And then there's kind of the humans parts, and dealing with all parts of it, it can get really tricky. But thinking about how we learn about incidents kind of brought me to just the concept of how we learn. And I heard about this thing called the learning pyramid. And I've put it into these little quotes because people don't like it. The reason is it kind of broke it down into like, we learn by like 5% writing and like 10%, 5% reading and 10% listening and like 15% like rewriting or whatever. And I don't want to go into it that deeply, but we can sort of think about like, how do you best learn when you're dealing with something new, right? We have active learning, we have passive learning, we have doing, and we have teaching, right? Where you're either listening to things like y'all are listening to me right now, hopefully you're learning. And then there's the kind of writing it down maybe in the post-mortem, and then there's actually like practicing, which we do a lot in SRE, right? We try to do Wheel of Misfortunes and kind of try to do chaos engineering, all these types of things to recreate the incidents. But one of the actual ways that we learn a lot is also by teaching, right? So how often do you sort of spend time talking to your other neighbor or other colleague and be like, this is how I did the thing? That's also how we sort of process information. And we do some of these, but how do we make sure that from things like instant retrospectives, we try to bring out as much learning as we can out of them, right? So thinking back to the incident life cycle, right? There's a lot of doing and learning in here too, but I'll say that I already kind of lied to y'all, so I'm sorry, because the map, it doesn't look like this, right? It's sort of cyclical, where after an incident ends, another one will start. They might not be related, but you're still using the learnings that you had from there, and it kind of goes into like a continuous like life cycle of just being an SRE or just being an engineer in general, right? You're learning from your mistakes and you kind of use those into new things. Maybe that'll become another mistake, but you kind of push through. And it is this sort of cycle, right, that happens. And I got this from the SRE book about accelerating SREs to on-call, and it definitely kind of covers the whole like thinking about how to do things, where that's when the documentation happens, reading the postmortems, and then there's like the doing, which is like reverse engineering them. So taking a postmortem and actually making that into a Wheel of Misfortune exercise, which would be really cool. I mean, it'll also show you where you didn't write down all the details because you were tired after it, but trying to kind of go through this cycle of not only reading, but also trying to do and kind of going back and forth, because both matter. We can't always just do, but we can't always just read either. There's a continuous learning and continuous teaching at the bottom, which I think is really helpful, especially as you become more senior as an SRE. So recently I stopped being an SRE and I currently work in developer relations at Datadog. And that's been cool for me, but I also realized that I spend less time being involved in incidents because I'm not kind of in the forefronts of it anymore. So I've been learning a lot from incident retrospectives. So I have one to kind of share with you. This happens to me a lot, especially in my SRE days. 0 days since it wasn't DNS, right? It's always DNS. And I was always just like, why is that? Like, I hear that all the time. Like, DNS is like the reason most times that like things break. And it's true, I've read a few now. But I was just like, why does it work that way? And if you're curious and you don't know anything about DNS, there's this really cool book that DNS Simple, I don't know how you pronounce their name. It's called How DNS Works, and it kind of walks you through how a beginning stage of how it works. But the first time I kind of really got into the weeds of DNS was when I was reading about an incident, which was when Facebook went down last year, right? So I don't know if you remember this, but October 4th, 2021, it was the day WhatsApp was black, right? All of a sudden, all the messages my mom sent me didn't come in. I was just like, she's been quiet today. And basically it was because WhatsApp and Facebook and Instagram were all just not working that day. So if you haven't read about it, kind of to give you an incline, the reason things broke was because Facebook has, it's a massive company, of course. It has data centers all over the place, and all of those data centers do different things, but there is something that connects all of it together, which is their kind of networking backbone, kind of pictured here in the pink, in the purple in the middle. So essentially, it's what tells all the data centers how to talk to each other. So me here versus me when I'm in Tanzania versus me when I'm in the US, if I go to India, whatever, can still get the same information, and it shouldn't take me very long, right? It communicates between their data centers. So essentially they were doing routine maintenance to make sure that everything was working, taking down part of the backbone, kind of bringing it back up. They were trying to check the availability of their backbone network that connects all their data centers together. And while they were doing that, the command was supposed to just check the availability, but it inevitably or unintentionally took down their entire backbone, which is not great because suddenly all of their data centers could not talk to each other. And that was already pretty terrible. But what went really bad for them is they have DNS, of course, and they have name servers that tell other name servers how to access popular parts of Facebook. And those kind of check to make sure that everything is healthy. And when they realized that all of Facebook's servers were down from their eyes, they're just like, oh, those aren't healthy, and just deleted all of those records in their name servers. So all of a sudden, even though all of their servers were up, no one could reach them. And what was really interesting to me is that Facebook actually had tested their backbone before, like basically just like a few months earlier, they went in and tried to figure out all of the failure possibilities, risks, and kind of took some time, put some observability on it, at least more. I know they had some already. But it was sort of kind of tough for them because basically with their entirety of their computers unable to talk to each other, all of their tooling just didn't work, even their internal tooling. And as an engineer, as I was reading it as it happened, and I heard that Facebook engineers couldn't access their buildings, I was just like, oh, dang, they're screwed. Like, basically, I was getting my friends being told that they couldn't even just go into their desks because just like everything went down. It was really, really awful. I don't know how to pause this. I'm gonna go back a slide. So essentially they figured out what happened and were able to break into their own data centers because that's what they had to do. And were able to gradually bring back up everything. And they knew that they couldn't do it all at once because then they would have a ton of load happening all at the same time. So it was definitely a very interesting incident for them, and that gave me better insights of how data centers talk to each other, because networking wasn't a thing that I knew too much about, and that was a really cool way for me to learn. And that's when I realized that, like, even not being an SRE anymore, just reading retrospectives, post-mortems can give me so much insight about technology as well. And even though I love thinking about the process, and I do a lot now, all of these parts, there's learning that you can do anywhere. So to recap, there are a lot of cool things that we can do and learn from incidents. They're very complex because we got technology, processes, and people all trying to do the right things all at the same time. And we know the best practices, at least somewhat, but we need to practice those so we know that when we are in this stressful situation, we can actually do them. So hopefully that cycle of having some kind of scar tissue from bad incidents won't make it that you feel badly about incident retrospectives or learning from incidents in the future. And kind of rethinking how we learn can be super helpful, right? Like I don't know if my story about learning about technologies from postmortems all the time can help you, but maybe it can. And we can learn from anywhere. I try to learn from all the times. I have another talk that I give about learning about incident management from rom-coms, because they do it really badly. You can learn about incidents from nature. They have a lot of really, really cool incidents, like natural disasters, so to say. And I chatted a little bit about that yesterday during the other incidents talk. There's a lot of different ways that we can learn from things. So whenever you can get a chance to learn a little bit, it can be really helpful. So with that, we're at an ending again. And like I said, I love endings. And hopefully I've tied this one into a knot for y'all. So I wanted to say thank you. My name is Ajuna Kyaruzi. I work as an SRE and DevOps advocate at Datadog. If you want to find me, reach me on the internet, call me, beat me, whatever the case is. And thanks so much.
Amazing. All right, any questions to Ajuna? There we go.
Hi, I was just wondering, who would you say would be the advised people to have within the retrospective? Because as like a principal lead, I have a lot of interested stakeholders, especially when the issue comes down to either poor performance or like structures not being followed.
Yeah.
Is it my job to go to the stakeholders after the meeting so we can still have accountability rather than blame? Or is it having the stakeholders involved but keeping it neutral and not pointing out people?
So that's a really good question. I think that it can be really cool to have multiple meetings, one with maybe the folks that were actually intended, where we can be like, okay, this is what happened, maybe one-on-one with the person who did the thing. But I also do generally think that computers should stop humans from making mistakes. We are human, we err, but computers should make it hard for us to do so. So if you gotta add a guardrail, that's on the team for not having it, not on the human. But of course, there can be other things that happen. So having that one-on-one definitely matters. I know that I've been to two different types of like learning from incident meetings, ones with stakeholders and ones without. The ones without involve alcohol sometimes. They don't have to. They can be substance-free. But definitely trying to separate that out where you can have the honest conversation and the learnings, but also obviously be as open with your stakeholders as you can, but your team. So kind of keeping that internal can kind of help. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
You had alluded to an owner
Yes.
for the follow-on items.
Yeah.
What kind of models have you seen that have been effective on that front?
So at Datadog right now, what we do is when we have, especially for high severity incidents, after the incident is over, usually it's the incident commander, but sometimes they pass it on and they're like, that person is in charge for follow-up. And we have 5 days that they have to collect all the information that they can. And then we have a reading group, a post-mortem reading group, where they read the postmortems like on a Tuesday, and then on Thursday we have a meeting with all the stakeholders, and the follow-up owner kind of presents all the information that they can. So they're definitely the coordination lead, where they try to tell folks to like get them info as quickly as they can, and they're in charge of making sure that the postmortem is written, sent to the reading group, and then they show up to the meeting on the Thursday to present what happened, but they're not the person who needs to do everything. Like they don't have to go get all the information. So that's what we do. Like that's why I called it like an instant commander, but for post-incident. Yeah.
Gotcha. So more from the process side of things, ensuring that things close out well, as opposed to like follow-on changes to like architecture or...
Yes.
Okay.
So all the tickets should be made, all the remediation items at the very least. This helps us a lot, especially because for our Sev 1 and Sev 2 incidents, we have our core incident commanders who have more experience kind of come in and help, but they can't be in charge of all of those large-scale incidents. So they pass on, after the incident is over, back to the subject matter expert on the team to make sure that they follow up on everything that happens. So that also helps with that transition.
Cool. Thank you.